The breeze runs through the vineyards of Napa, but the atmosphere is anything but idyllic. Teresa Lisbon, Patrick Jane, and Kimball Cho step out of their official vehicle to encounter a scene that shatters the peace of the place. The lifeless body of a young woman has been found at the site. They are greeted there by the local sheriff, Thomas McAllister, a rugged-looking man who watches with curiosity as the CBI agents begin their work. While Lisbon and Cho crouch down to examine the corpse, Jane stays a step back, analyzing not only the body, but the entire environment with the clinical gaze that characterizes him. At first glance, there is a stab wound, but something does not fit. There is not much blood, and the wound does not seem to have been the cause of death. Upon closer inspection, they notice there are no ligature marks on the neck, but the girl's gums are livid and her eyes show small hemorrhages. The diagnosis is clear: asphyxiation. Jane, with his usual carefree tone that sometimes borders on insolence, steps in to say that the girl was from the town and that, strange as it may seem, her death was an accident. According to Patrick, the killer did not intend to kill her, at least not at that moment. The victim was tied up and gagged, but she was still dressed. The plan was to take her somewhere else to abuse her, but the young woman must have panicked and made too much noise. In a desperate attempt to silence her, the attacker suffocated her by mistake. Seeing that she was no longer of use to him, he disposed of the body in a place that only someone who knows the area well would choose. Sheriff McAllister, confused by the confidence of this man who does not seem like a police officer, asks Lisbon who he is. She explains that he is a consultant, and McAllister, somewhat skeptical, asks Jane if he is a psychic or if he has some psychic power. Patrick smiles with the irony that defines him. He confesses that he has no powers, although he admits that in the past he pretended to have them to scam people. Faced with the sheriff's bewildered look, Jane challenges him to a simple game of rock, paper, scissors. What seems like a joke turns into a psychological humiliation. Jane beats him 6 times in a row, predicting each of McAllister's moves before it happens, leaving the sheriff frustrated and speechless before the consultant's evident mental superiority. Shortly after, the team arrives at the house of the victim, Melanie O'Keefe. Her parents, Joe and Mercedes, wait outside with their hearts in their throats until Lisbon confirms the tragedy. While the parents collapse, Jane enters the house and goes to the girl's bedroom, where he finds her younger brother, Frankie. The boy, sitting on his sister's bed, asks him directly if someone killed her. Jane, without filters or false compassion, tells him yes. Meanwhile, outside, the parents reveal that Melanie was an exemplary girl. She worked as a waitress at the Shand Creek Winery restaurant and had just won a scholarship to UCLA. She was so reserved that she had even taken a purity vow. However, inside the bedroom, Jane discovers a different reality. He notices rectangular marks on the walls where posters once hung. Frankie confesses that Melanie took them down after Christmas and that they were photos of famous boys. But the most revealing detail is on the ceiling. Photos taped up forming the letter H. In one of them, Melanie appears with a friend, but someone has been violently torn out of the picture. Before leaving, Frankie asks Jane for a somber favor, to tell him who the killer was as soon as he finds out. Jane agrees, feeling that in the boy's gaze there is something more than simple sadness. There is a desire for revenge that he knows all too well. Back at the offices, the investigation picks up pace. Jane informs Lisbon and Cho that Melanie had a secret lover since Christmas, someone her parents would never have approved of for being too old or perhaps for having a dangerous reputation. The clue is clear. His name begins with H, and that explains why the girl was not wearing her purity ring when they found her. At that moment, Sheriff McAllister provides a key detail. He says he saw a black truck speeding away from the winery on the night of the crime, around 11. The team heads to the Shand Creek Winery restaurant to speak with the owners, Malcolm and Sandra Boatwright. While Lisbon questions the couple, Jane devotes himself to what he does best: observe and provoke. He tastes Malcolm's food and notices that he uses an excessive amount of butter, a detail that for Jane is not minor. It indicates an indulgent and selfish personality. In the kitchen, they witness a small incident where a cook named Randall accidentally burns himself. The tension in the place is palpable. Sandra shows them Melanie's time card, which indicates that she clocked out at 11:25 p.m. But Jane has his eyes on someone else, Raquel, the waitress who appeared in the photo in Melanie's bedroom. Raquel denies being her best friend and claims not to know anything about a boyfriend, but Jane knows she is lying. With Cho's forced complicity, Jane manages to be alone with her. Using a hypnotic and relaxing tone of voice, almost like a whisper, he begins to suggest to the young woman. He tells her to think about him before going to sleep, that she will feel safe, and that the next time she sees him and he says, "Hello," she will feel the need to release all the burden she is carrying and tell him the truth. Raquel tries to act tough and leaves, but the seed of suggestion has already been planted by the mentalist. After searching Melanie's locker, the team finds a small handwritten note with a single word, "Sorry." Jane, seeing the perfect opportunity to pressure the suspects, decides to put on one of his shows. He gathers all the employees and confidently announces that the note was written by the killer. He presents Cho as a handwriting expert and demands that everyone provide a sample of their writing. The plan works immediately. Randall, the cook who had burned himself earlier, cannot withstand the pressure and faints in front of everyone. Already at the sheriff's office, Randall breaks down and confesses. He admits that he wrote the note, but swears that he did not kill her. He explains that he stayed after his shift to try something with her, thinking that since she was a virgin, he had to take the initiative. Melanie rejected him bluntly and left angrily. He wrote the note the next day out of fear that she would report him to the owners of the place. This testimony changes the board. If Randall was with her for 5 or 6 minutes, it means that Melanie was still in the parking lot after 11. She was waiting for someone. Meanwhile, from Sacramento, Van Pelt provides a key piece of the puzzle. She finds a similar case in a database. A woman named Dolores Sanchez was kidnapped at a bus stop and woke up in a motel tied up with duct tape, although she was released without physical harm. The common trait is undeniable. Dolores, like Melanie, was redheaded. Jane begins to build the profile of the predator. He is not an experienced killer, but someone who is just starting, a novice who struggles between his dark impulses and his fear. He kidnapped the first girl to practice, but with Melanie something went wrong. He panicked and killed her accidentally so she would not scream. At that moment, Raquel, the waitress Jane had previously hypnotized, enters the police station with a vacant look. Jane approaches, gently touches her, and says a simple hello. The effect of the suggestion is instantaneous. Breaking her silence, she confesses that Melanie had a secret relationship with Hector Ramirez, a second cousin. He was the person missing from the torn photo, and the H on the ceiling was for him. They had arranged to meet on the night of the crime, but Raquel had said nothing out of fear of Hector's temperamental personality. The police rush to capture Hector. When they arrive at his house, the young man tries to flee desperately. In a chase sequence through the streets, Hector turns a corner with a machete in his hand, only to find himself face to face with a Patrick Jane who waits for him calmly next to his truck, showing not a hint of fear. Before the suspect can react, Lisbon appears out of nowhere and takes him down with a perfect tackle, disarming him and putting him into custody. However, Hector's interrogation leaves Jane with doubts. Hector admits that he was going to meet her at 11:30 p.m. but that he arrived late, grew impatient, and left. Lisbon is convinced that he is the culprit, especially because the timing in the parking lot is too tight for another attacker to have acted. But Jane keeps staring at the timeline on the board and notices something strange. While Lisbon focuses on the physical evidence, Jane observes Frankie, Melanie's brother, who waits in the lobby with a somber look and a suspiciously heavy backpack. Jane decides to take the boy to a nearby cafe. With his ability to read people, he directly asks him to show him the weapon he is carrying in the backpack. Frankie tries to deny it, but ends up revealing a small axe. Jane, in a moment of unusual honesty and vulnerability, tells the boy his own tragedy, how he lost his wife and daughter for seeking revenge. He tries to make him understand that the path of hatred will not bring his sister back. While he talks with the boy, Jane receives a call from Van Pelt. Following his secret instructions and lying about Lisbon's orders, she has found a nearby motel with a cash reservation that no one used on the night of the crime. Jane heads there and after speaking with the manager, discovers a room rented by a man who wore a disguise. Upon searching the closets, he finds gloves, bleach, and plastic sheeting. The killer is not finished. He has been preparing the room like a surgical stage for his next victim. The trap is set, but not for who they think. Patrick returns to the sheriff's office to find a satisfied Lisbon. The evidence seems definitive. They have found Melanie's blood in Hector's truck. When confronted, Hector admits that on one occasion he hit her and caused a nosebleed, but swears that he did not kill her. Lisbon believes she has the case closed, but Jane knows the blood is only a distraction or a previous incident. He insists on taking Teresa to the motel to show her his discovery. There, he shows her a live feed on a small television. It is Van Pelt, who is wearing a hidden camera, getting ready in the bathroom of the winery restaurant. Jane's plan is risky and uses his own colleagues as bait. He knows that the killer is someone who cannot resist the opportunity to possess a red-headed woman if it is presented to him on a silver platter. At the restaurant, Van Pelt and Rigsby fake a violent argument in front of everyone. Rigsby storms off furiously, leaving Van Pelt alone and vulnerable. She begins to walk down the dark road, waiting for the predator to take the bait. Suddenly, a patrol car stops. It is Sheriff McAllister. The man tries to convince her to get into the car for her safety, but he becomes so insistent and aggressive that Rigsby, watching from a nearby van, loses his temper and rushes out to tackle the sheriff, believing that he is the culprit. While Jane and Lisbon watch the chaos on the monitor, Patrick realizes that his trap has caught the wrong man. McAllister is only a rough man with bad manners, not the killer. Jane mentally retraces his steps and returns to his initial theory about the food. Malcolm Boatwright's excessive use of butter was not just a culinary detail. It was proof of a psychopathic personality who indulges his desires without control. Malcolm is a glutton for sensations, and his wife Sandra is his necessary accomplice, the one who cleans up his messes and helps him obtain his toys. Lisbon, frustrated by the mistake with the sheriff, leaves the motel to try to fix the diplomatic disaster with the local police. She gets into her car and answers a call, distracted, without noticing that a Shand Creek Winery van enters the motel parking lot. Meanwhile, Jane remains inside the room when the door opens. Malcolm and Sandra enter carrying an unconscious young woman, tied up with duct tape. Upon seeing Jane sitting calmly, the atmosphere turns icy. Malcolm pulls out a knife and Sandra points a gun at Jane. Patrick, finding himself cornered and unarmed, uses his only tool, words. He begins to sow doubt between them, reminding them that Malcolm is the one who enjoys the process, while Sandra is the one who takes the risks. He manages to make the couple start arguing, gaining vital seconds. Just as Malcolm lunges at him, Lisbon kicks the door down. In a moment of pure adrenaline, Teresa shoots Malcolm in the chest, and before Sandra can react, also opens fire on her. The winery owners fall dead in the very scene they had prepared for their next victim. Days later, the team attends Melanie's funeral. It is a moment of silence and reflection on the darkness that can hide behind a facade of success and good cooking. The Boatwrights had no logical motive. They simply did it because they could, feeding a hunger that was never satisfied. Jane watches the O'Keeffes from a distance. He knows that closing the case does not erase the pain, but at least he has prevented little Frankie from carrying an axe and a murder on his conscience. With an unusually tender gesture, Jane places his hand on Lisbon's shoulder and both walk away from the cemetery, leaving behind another horror story solved by the brilliant and twisted mind of the Mentalist. And this is as far as we go with the summary of this episode of The Mentalist. A case that began with a body in a vineyard and ended up proving that no one is what they seem, and that Patrick Jane is always 3 steps ahead of everyone, even the police themselves. If you want to keep reliving the series and see how Jane continues closing impossible cases while searching for his own justice, on the channel you will find the complete playlist with all the summaries in order.